Hello, and thank you for accessing this recording. My name is Elena Bennett, and I'm the Product Development Officer for Digital T-Levels at NCFE. In this bite-sized recording, we're going to explore the Chief Examiner's report for Digital Business Services Core Exams and ESP from the Summer 24 series. We'll be providing some insights into the findings around core papers A and B and the Employer Set project. We'll share some key themes to celebrate, some areas for development, and some suggested strategies for how to address these within your classroom. So we'll start with an overview of the key areas of strength and for development across both the core papers and the ESP. So we can see that many answers reflected an attempt to analyse and evaluate. At times, there were some excellent quality responses to tasks that demonstrated that students have a developed knowledge of digital business. Presentation tasks continue to be of a good standard, with a wide range of digital skills being demonstrated. And as with the previous series, there's been continued improvement in the evidence which students are presenting with their ESP. There's also evidence of improved English and digital skills among students this series. However, there were some areas for development arising. These were that lack of secure subject knowledge and contextualisation did affect students' marks. There were gaps in exam technique and high-order thinking skills. Where specific topics have not been well understood in previous series, relatively few students have focused on these topics in preparation for this series. And in the longer questions, there was a lack of analysis and evaluation, and also lack of evidence of reasoning. So now we'll take a look at each of the core papers in a bit more detail. So we'll begin with paper A and each of its sections. So we can see here that in section A, the business context and culture, students lost marks where questions required AO2 or AO3 skills, for example, where an extended response question required evaluation or analysis in relation to a context. Linking to this, there was also a lack of development of key points. Two-part questions were not explored or understood in terms of command verbs, and students weren't able to apply concepts to a range of different contexts. So therefore, overall, the quality of the extended response questions was limited. And moving on to section B, the digital environment and diversity and inclusion. There was a lack of knowledge around specific PC components, their significance and their purpose. Students struggle to note the difference between inclusion and digital inclusion and often fail to make links with the case study. They also fail to explain the cause and effect element of faults, and therefore, overall, the case study data use was generally poor. In section C of paper A, the learning and planning section, students seem to struggle to demonstrate understanding of the key models of reflection, and often simply name the theorists who created the models rather than naming the models. A few students were able to demonstrate knowledge of how project planning techniques might apply in different contexts. So now we move on to paper B. So in section A, tools and testing, there tended to be a focus on Microsoft Word and not enough focus on collaborative tools. Students struggle to distinguish between software applications, the tools they contain, and the outputs they produce. And few students seem to be able to name specific evaluation tools, with most giving generic measures of business performance such as profits. Rather than examining why multiple methods might be beneficial, many responses focused on description of a single specific method. And in section B, the legislation and security, students were able to name a network protocol, but few were able to select one that might be relevant to the context. It was identified that students are not always familiar with the basic content of the specification and therefore not always able to articulate the meaning of the various acronyms in the content. There was also some confusion between the differences between civil and criminal law. In section C of paper B, data and digital analysis, generally there was good performance for a lot of this section. However, there was some lack of understanding around flowcharts, descriptions tended to be given rather than students being able to apply processes or controls in context. An example here being role-based access control, RBAC. Students struggle to name tools and differentiate between their application and the tasks that may be completed using specific software, and more focus is needed overall on the presentation of data and which method might suit a particular audience or purpose. So we'll move on to the employer set project. So following the feedback from the core exam, the second assessment within year one of the digital business service T-level is the employer set project. So we will break the chief examiner's feedback for this down by task. So firstly, task 1. The key points highlighted by the chief examiner are as follows. Performance could be improved by ensuring that students are confident in knowing the different project management tools that could be assessed for the task. They also could refer back to the project brief throughout the task to ensure they're fully understanding the specific requirements and that their work relates to the given scenario. Similar to previous series, many students are still not considering all elements of the task. However, students who performed well on this task were able to explain how the factors and issues would impact on the project, relating their work well to the given brief. Students performing less well tended not to be linking their justifications to the context of the project brief, and many of their judgments were generic in nature. So now we'll have a look at task 2. So firstly, we have the observations from task 2A. Students who performed less well in this task were able to provide a range of sources of data, both internal and external, that could be used. However, some of these were generic and didn't provide useful data relating to the project brief. There were some students in this series who tended to consider how data could be cleansed and analysed rather than which sources of data they might need for the project. This led to students providing less depth in their report than students who had been more selective of their sources of data. And now we look at task 2B and the actions associated with this task. So the first action was to improve performance further. Students need to ensure they're confident in the creation and the use of tools they'll need for the task. Some students did identify errors in the data but did not perform the data cleanse. And for the entity relationship diagram, some students were able to present a recognisable ERD. However, this was not always complete and they were not able to identify the primary or foreign keys. The second action, the ways in which data was presented tended to be less organised, and students tended not to select data that was relevant to the project brief. Those students performing less well tended to use all the data they were provided with, which meant they included data that related to activities not related to the redevelopment. And finally, action 3 for this task. Students performing less well provided limited explanations of why they selected certain data for the action, and students tended to focus on the actions they have taken rather than how the data can be used to inform the project. Where previous actions had not been completed in depth, action 3 was therefore more challenging. So moving on to task 3 of the ESP. This involved the presentation of research findings, and examiners noted that some students produced presentations that explained the different requirements of the task rather than explaining how they related to Wavetainment Limited. Some students included data and charts, but did not explain how they were relevant to the project of what Wavetainment Limited should do as a result of the findings. Solutions offered by lower performing students did tend to be generic in nature and not always relevant to the specific issues being faced by the business. Students should ensure that they are linking back to the project aims on each slide. Students are addressing most of the tasks but are consistently missing one or more elements of a task, especially when they are asked to include a lot of information in their evidence. Students need to ensure they're reading the task fully identifying all the evidence they need to include, and that they are ensuring it is all addressed in order to demonstrate good or excellent performance. In terms of digital and English skills within the presentations, so for digital skills, students should be encouraged to demonstrate their mastery of the presentation software in any way they feel would best engage the directors of the business. This could be through making slides more interactive, or engaging with more movement, or through their use of the image formatting tools to present their visual data in a more unique way. There are still some students who are not fully utilising the editor tools available to them in their chosen presentation software. However, overall, spelling and grammatical errors have reduced this series in students' presentations. Lastly, we'll have a look at task 4, which is an evaluation task. There were some key points raised here relating to students' ability to review their own performance, what this meant for the project as a whole, and what impact gaps in their own knowledge and skills has had on the project. So examiners noted that students can summarise their actions within each task of the ESP. However, these tended to be more superficial or generic in nature and not linked to the project aims. Some students provided more of a summary of the actions they took, but did not then consider how their performance in each task or how their skills impacted on the overall performance in the project. Some students also tended to provide a summary of the project performance rather than a review of their performance in each task. Students who performed well in this task were able to identify their own areas for development and really consider how they would be able to develop these skills and how that would make their next project more successful. So now that we've explored some common themes across the core assessments, we can look at strategies as to how to improve student outcomes. So these 3 key areas should help your students to prepare for the core exams in the ESP. So firstly, evaluation. So developing students' evaluation skills, you could encourage students to evaluate 2 different tools and techniques in class, ask them to assess the strengths, the weaknesses, and overall impact on business efficiency. Use example project briefs to make links with industry. To practice exam techniques, you could increase classroom exposure to extended response questions, focusing on how to structure answers, how to make sure the question is answered in full, and how to successfully link theoretical knowledge with practical examples. And for data analysis, it'd be useful to create opportunities for using data. So use the example data sets on the NCFE website, or create your own to structure classroom tasks. You could use this to examine different ways of presenting data and how to extract data relevant to example project briefs. So now that we've explored some strategies and real ideas you can try in your classroom, I'd just like to remind you of the support we offer you during your T-level delivery. There are many more recorded sessions on our YouTube playlist, which is accessible following the link or by searching for NCFE on YouTube. From this video today, you can navigate back to our digital specific recording, and you'll find videos here that will help you to prepare for digital assessments. Please do spend some time finding what's appropriate for you and your students. You can also find support materials via our qualifications page on the NCFE website. If you're new to T-levels, please visit this page. There are lots of resources here to support your delivery. Via this page, you can book to join us on our live events and see what support we're offering moving forward. The page is divided into months, so it's easy to see what's available and be able to plan it into your diary. We also offer one-to-one support, so if you haven't already, please do book a call with me so that we can work together as you begin or continue your T-level delivery. These calls are designed to be bespoke for your provider and a chance to get support and for us to answer your questions. You'll see the link to book a call is at the bottom of the slide. But in the meantime, if you do have any individual T-level queries, you can email me or our dedicated T-level team via the address on screen. And lastly, we'd really appreciate it if you could use the QR code on the screen to share your valuable feedback. Your comments really do help us reflect on our sessions and offer targeted and relevant support, which in turn allows you to get the best outcomes for your students. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I hope you found this recording useful and look forward to seeing you at our live events over the coming year.